You know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We're back! Oh, I messed up. Hold on. Hold your horses. Hold steady. Now we're cooking with grease. Hello, happy people. You know what time it is. It's time for Storytime with Chris, lovelies. We are back. Now, as I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, skiing time, study time, break time, work time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. Hi, y'all. And we're back. And don't worry, I'm going to be uploading some new episodes this week onto the YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you have not already done so, please go to my YouTube channel for Storytime with Chris. It only takes you literally less than 3 seconds to hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so you don't miss a vid. No, I don't do Storytime with Chris for profit. I do it to get kids as well as adults excited about the magic of literature. Because to me, reading is not just fundamental, it is essential to learn about different languages, different cultures, different walks of life, relatable situations, problem solving. So many different aspects that are very valuable to how we function in life are held, sometimes, if not all the time, within the pages of a book. How do you expect to learn if somebody didn't either write it down or used oral instruction? Meaning, like, okay, so for example, there are fairy tales that are told amongst different cultures that were never written down. They were like orally carried on and shared through. So that's what I mean by that. But most of what we learn in life comes through the pages of a book or a diary or a journal or an instruction manual. But let's go ahead and get started because our friends are now separated. Voyaging Moon is on her own. And we're going to see what happens to her in the midst of her new circumstances. There we go. And no, I don't own the music that you were, listening to in the background, which is brought to you by our wonderful friend on YouTube, Mr. Ambiance. Like and share and subscribe to their YouTube channel. They have great ambient music from anime, manga, movies, TV shows, animation, anything you could think of. And it's always really good ambient music, hence why I use them frequently. And that it's copyright free, thank God. Let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 15. The Tale of the Singing Flute. A man called Hong was innkeeper of the Golden Grasshopper in the town of Chenye. This fellow Hong had a quick eye for profit and a deaf ear for what did not work at his advantage. He gave nothing without getting more in return. No one ever bettered him in a bargain. When a terrible storm forced travelers to seek refuge at his inn, Hong doubled his prices for food and lodging, delighted that the misfortunes of others turned into a benefit for himself, which is terrible. It was at this time, some days after the storm had passed, that a young girl came to the kitchen door and politely asked for food. Her face was bruised, her garments were torn and weather-stained. Even so, she did not have the air of one accustomed to begging. The cook would gladly have given her a handful of leftovers, but Hong happened to come into the kitchen at that moment. When he saw what the cook was about to do, Hong shouted angrily at him and pushed him aside. "Do you mean to bankrupt me?" he cried. "Your business is cooking food, not giving it away." He turned to the girl. "Be off! You'll get nothing for nothing here." The girl did not move, but looked squarely at Hong. She was none other than Voyaging Moon. The gale that had swept away Jen and the others had flung her amid the reeds and cattails of a little backwater. Battered, half drowned, she opened her eyes to find herself alone, the flute clutched tightly in her hand. For days afterward, she searched along the riverbank from dawn to dusk, even through most of the nights. She questioned children playing along the shore, women washing clothes in the shallows, and everyone who would cross her path. No one, they told her sadly, could have survived such a tempest on the river. What kept her heart from breaking then and there was her certainty that since she was alive, so must the others be. At last, driven by hunger and exhaustion, she came to Chen Ye and the golden grasshopper. Once she had eaten a little and regained strength, she determined to search yet again, to comb both banks of the Lo from source to mouth, if need be. The innkeeper's refusal did not discourage her in the least. "Nothing for nothing?" Voyaging Moon said. "That's a fair exchange." "What of something for something? My work for your food." Hong thought this over for a few moments. His inn was crowded, his servants hardly able to keep up with their tasks, his guests already complaining and threatening to leave if conditions did not get better. He badly needed another pair of willing hands, but he quickly calculated the girl's labor would be worth far more than what she ate. Of that he would make sure. "Agreed," Hong said with a show of reluctance, "but only because I have a generous heart. You can have what you scrap out of those pots and pans and not a mouthful more. For the rest, you'll do as you're told, no shirking, no laziness. Even at that, I'm cheating myself. I can't help it, that's how I am." "Generosity must be a painful affliction," Voyaging Moon sympathized. "I hope you don't suffer too much from it." Which, by the way, being generous is not a painful affliction. Because he's doing the opposite. He's very selfish. All that day, Voyaging Moon did every task that Hong demanded. Scrubbing, sweeping, fetching water, hauling charcoal with never a word of complaint. The cook secretly made sure the girl was fed with more than pot scrapings, and he prepared her a pallet of straw in the kitchen corner. At nightfall, when Voyaging Moon finished her work, she did not rest. A hopeful thought had come to her mind. She left the kitchen and climbed to the roof of the inn. There, perched cross-legged on the tiles, she put the flute to her lips and played a soaring melody, praying that somehow Jen would hear it wherever he might be, and that the music would bring him to her. As she played, her heart followed the notes shimmering like stars in the dark sky. The voice of the flute sang of love, longing, and hope. Indeed, the instrument seemed to have its own spirit that spoke wordlessly but clearly as if playing of itself, its tone more beautiful than it had ever been. Voyaging Moon stopped. She was not alone. The music meant for Jen had drawn other listeners. Guests had come out of their chambers, tradesmen from their shops, passers-by had halted in the street below. As Voyaging Moon put aside her instrument, cries of disappointment rose from the crowd, and they pleaded for her to continue. The innkeeper had hurried from his counting room to learn the cause of the commotion outside. "Come down," he shouted when he saw Voyaging Moon and her flute. "You should be scrubbing pots for your keep, not amusing yourself with my valuable time. You must put a broom in your hand instead of that wooden whistle." At this, the crowd around Hong protested loudly, insisting on the girl playing again. A few even threatened to give Hong a good beating if he forbade her to do so. Many more, however, pressed money into his hands, urging him to reward such a marvelous musician and induce her to keep on. The bewildered innkeeper had wits enough to pop the cash into his purse. Though he had no ear for music, he heard coins clinking merrily enough, and by the time Voyaging Moon climbed from the roof, Hong's vinegar frowned was transformed into a honeyed smile. "My dear young lady," Hong said, "if I spoke harshly, if it was only because I feared for your safety. You could have fallen and harmed yourself. Step inside. Night air is bad for the lungs. If only you had told me you had such a valuable skill. Have you eaten well today? Come along, come along," he added, taking Voyaging Moon's arm and drawing her inside. The guests, along with a number of passers-by, followed. All begged to hear more of her music. Hong made a place for Voyaging Moon in the middle of the eating room, called for food and drink to be served to her. Then, rubbing his hands, he asked her to take up the flute again. "Surely you won't deny these good folk the pleasure of your music," Hong said. "Look around you, lovely lady, and see how many have come to hear." Though Voyaging Moon's grief had burdened her heart, she had not dulled her wits. She saw that Hong had gone to each of the one in the room, demanding more cash. His purse was already full to bursting. It came quickly to her mind that a share of Hong's profits would allow her to hire a riverboat, buy provisions, and employ helpers in her search for Jen. "I won't deny anyone the pleasure of my music," she replied sweetly, "and you, Master Hong, won't deny me payment for it, as you yourself told me." "Nothing for nothing." Hong sputtered and protested, but the guests had grown impatient, threatening to leave and demanding their money back. So Hong fished into his purse and produced a couple of coins. "Why, Master Hong, what of your generous heart?" Voyaging Moon said, "not to mention the weight of your purse. It seems to me we can strike a better bargain. Equal portions should be a reasonable division." No, you're right. That won't do at all," she added, as Hong squealed indignantly. "Much better to make it 3 coins out of 10. That is 3 for you, and 7 for me." Hong shook his fist and tore his hair, claiming that Voyaging Moon would ruin him. "How can that be?" Voyaging Moon said, "since it costs you nothing to begin with. What you gain is pure profit. Furthermore, if I refuse to play, you'll gain nothing at all." No matter how the innkeeper groaned and wrung his hands, Voyaging Moon held to her offer. Finally, Hong grudgingly accepted. Voyaging Moon then played for the assembled audience so charmingly and graciously that Hong was able to extract still more cash from them as well as from new arrivals. At the end of the evening, Voyaging Moon required the innkeeper to spread all the coins on a table, holding nothing back, and she herself made the division. Even with his 3 coins out of 10, Hong reckoned on fat profits in his future. "I should also mention," Voyaging Moon said, "that I'd play much better if I slept in my own chamber instead of a straw mat in the kitchen." Hong ground his teeth, but finally had to agree. Voyaging Moon tucked her earnings into her jacket and returned to the room Hong reluctantly provided. Sorry, I had to scratch my foot. That's why I was wriggling around. I was like, I'm gonna get it. Next evening, she played again before an even larger audience, to the increasing joy of the innkeeper. She did likewise the following evening. Nevertheless, when she had finished performing, she still climbed to the roof and poured out her music to the night sky, ever hopeful it would reach the ears of her beloved. By the end of the week, Voyaging Moon calculated that she had earned enough to continue her search, better outfitted than before. She announced to the innkeeper that she would depart the following morning. Hong was furious at the thought of losing future profits. Voyaging Moon, however, told him flatly that she would play no longer, and in no way could he force her to do so. "If you try," she warned, "I'll play so badly it will drive every guest from your inn, and you will be worse off than ever." Hong could not browbeat her into changing her mind. Realizing she was no longer of any use to him, he quickly shaped a plan. "The wench thinks she's had the best of me. That remains to be seen." Hong set his plan in motion without an instant delay. That very evening, he struck up a conversation with a merchant who had just arrived and planned to leave early next morning. "One of my bond maids has taken advantage of my good nature," Hong told the merchant. "She's turned slack and imprudent, and I'd like to be rid of her. I haven't the heart to throw her out into the street. I'll sell you to her at a bargain price if I'm sure you'll give her a good home. She may need a stricter hand than mine. I've been too soft with her, that's my nature. But if you pay no heed to the lies and wild tales she tells and let her know who's master, she'll be obedient enough. She can even tootle a few notes on the flute, but I won't ask for extra for that. One thing I do want," he added, "is that jacket of hers she wears. I loaned it to her and must have it back." Lying. Terrible lying. Considering that his wife had been plaguing him to buy a bond maid, the merchant gladly paid out the low price Hong demanded. Before dawn the next day, they went to Voyaging Moon's chamber. Hong had forewarned the merchant that the girl was so devoted to him that she would resist every effort to take her away. Therefore, the innkeeper provided some lengths of rope and no added charge. Voyaging Moon was already awaiting dress when the two burst in. Though taken unaware, she kicked and bit and fought with all her strength, but they overpowered her. Hong tore away the jacket where she had hidden her money. Voyaging Moon found herself bound and gagged, hauled down to the stable, and thrown into the merchant's carriage along with her flute. Captive, robbed of her earnings, she was borne southward, far from the river Lo, where she had planned to search. For all that, she kept a brave heart. Her determination only strengthened. Therefore, during the days that followed, instead of raging and struggling, she cleverly made a show of docility. The merchant felt confident enough to remove her gag. She told him she was glad to be free of Hong, which was quite true. She gathered that the merchant lived in Chaiseng, the capital of the northern province. She resolved to escape before they reached that city. During the journey, the merchant lodged Voyaging Moon in stables of roadside inns where they halted at each day's end. Before retiring, he made sure the girl was securely tied for the night. One evening, as he was about to leave the stable for his chamber, Voyaging Moon called him back. "Now that we are far from Master Hong," she said, "I can tell you this. He cheated you. You bought my flute along, didn't you? Yes, well, what he didn't tell you is that it's a remarkable instrument. When played, you'd be amazed at what it does." Voyaging Moon explained no further. The merchant, his curiosity roused, took the flute from the carriage. He examined it, finding nothing extraordinary. Voyaging Moon urged him to blow into it. When he did so, however, he produced nothing but squeaks and whistles. "Let me show you how." Voyaging Moon said. "Untie my hand so I can hold it properly." The merchant did as she asked. Then she sat down in a corner of the stable and watched her closely. Hoping and praying her plan would succeed, Voyaging Moon put the flute to her lips. Hardly breathing, she played the softest, gentlest melody. The flute whispered and murmured as if its spirit answered her wishes. "Remarkable indeed," the merchant said in a hushed voice. "Why, it seems the same lullaby my mother sang to me when I was an infant. I've heard nothing like it these many years." He brushed away a tear. Keep on, I beg of you." The merchant closed his eyes and blissfully smiled. Within moments his head nodded and dropped to his breast. Blowing out his lips, toying with his fingers, he snored and gurgled happily away. Voyaging Moon tucked the flute into her shirt. "You don't mind if I borrow your horse, do you?" Receiving no contrary answer, she quickly unhitched the animal. Before climbing astride, she patted the slumbering merchant on the head. "Sweet dreams," said Voyaging Moon. Though it was not the largest of towns, Nang Pe boasted the finest theater in the province. Traveling companies of tumblers, jugglers, singers, and dancers went out of their way to stop there. The folk of Nang Pe also welcomed these performers. That autumn, however, the one who drew the warmest applause, their loudest cheers, and their delighted devotion was a girl who charmed them with the music of her flute. She could not set foot in the streets without admirers crowding her. Young swans, lovesmen sent her jewels, necklaces, bracelets, her hand in marriage. But the girl graciously declined all such offerings. Rumored had it that she was richer than any of her would-be suitors. When not performing, she kept mainly to herself in the chambers above the theater. Unlike her colleagues, she did not bedeck herself in bright robes, fanciful headdresses, and other garish finery. On stage, she wore a coarse cotton shirt and trousers. This pleasant simplicity endeared her all the more to her devoted audiences. Also, she had the strange custom each night of climbing to the rooftop and alone playing melodies still more beautiful than those who played in public. This odd habit only enraptured her listeners. Because of a certain air of mystery about her, and because she was never seen in public eating rooms, tea houses, or taverns, the townsfolk affectionately called her Lady Shadow Behind a Screen. She was in fact Voyaging Moon. All this had come about after she had galloped off, leading the merchant sleeping soundly. Heading northward again, she happened to fall with a troop of dancers and jugglers on their way to Nang Pe. Seeing that she carried a flute, they persuaded her to play, and were so enchanted they urged her to join them. At first she refused. She intended to continue to the river Lo. This, she was told, would be extremely dangerous, if not altogether impossible. As one of the jugglers explained, a powerful warlord was ravaging the countryside, defeating every army set against him. He already held sway in many districts. His troops showed no regard or mercy for innocent folk caught between the lines of these fierce battles. It was said he had once been abandoned. Now he called himself the Yellow Scarf King. Voyaging Moon remembered all too well the brutality of Natha. Impatient though she was to continue northward, she could not risk falling into his clutches again. For the moment she reluctantly had to admit the sensible course was to heed the troops' warning and follow their advice, and so she went with them to Nang Pe. There the theater director was as open-handed as Hong had been tight-fisted. Hearing her play, he promised a handsome share of his profits and was better than his word. Her fame and fortune grew. Voyaging Moon, or Lady Shadow Behind a Screen, was able to commission the best craftsmen to build a carriage so spacious and well-appointed that she could live in it as comfortably as in a chamber. She bought 6 fine horses and began to lay in a store of provisions, hoping the fighting would subside and she might leave Nang Pe before winter. Meantime, she played her flute alone each night on the rooftop, her thoughts ever turning to Jen. Or Mosha. Was he still alive? Had he found Mafu and Mosha? Of that, she never permitted herself to doubt. "If he has gone," she told herself, "he will come back. If he is searching for me, he will find me." Are Voyaging Moon's hopes justified? While she, by accident, has gained fame and fortune, what has become of our beloved Jen? To find out, leave Voyaging Moon in Nang Pe and read the next chapter. And that is where we will end for today. I will see you all next time, y'all. Be good.